Okay, over on the driver's side, there's a few more things. And again, my wife just reminded me that the examiners expect to hear the word secure, not snug. So that's something you want to remember. Okay, on the driver's side, we're going to start by checking our air compressor pump, which is gear driven. It is secure. There's no missing nuts and bolts. It's not bent, cracked, broken, or worn. It's not leaking. All the air lines are secure, not worn, not leaking. Underneath, behind, and it's really hard to see this, but behind the air compressor is the power steering pump, which is also gear driven. It is secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, not leaking. Check the lines coming from the power steering pump, going into the reservoir, secure, no missing clamps, not worn, not leaking. Check the power steering reservoir, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, not leaking. I'm going to check the fluid level by removing the little dipstick, wiping it clean, put it back in, pull it out a second time, and make sure it's a proper level above the fill mark. And then way back here, hopefully you can see this, is the engine oil dipstick. Tell them you check the engine oil by having the engine off, pull the dipstick out and wipe it clean, put it in, pull it out, and make sure it's above the fill mark. Okay, a couple more things here. We're going to be checking our steering gearbox. Again, it's gear driven. It is secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, not leaking. Check the steering rod or steering shaft, whatever you want to call it. Steering column, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn. There's no debris around the shaft. Okay, and then the steering linkage. Now, steering linkage consists of the pitman arm, the drag link, the steering arm, and then way back here in the back is your tie rod and your ball joint. All these parts are secure, no missing nuts and bolts, Carter keys in place as needed, nothing's bent, cracked, broken, or worn. Okay, so now I think we're ready to go on to the third part of the pre-trip, which is the axles. And I'm going to do all three axles, the front, the drive, and the trailer axle. I'm going to start on the outside here. So I want to tell them I'm checking my tire with a tread gauge. I'm going to make sure I got at least 430 seconds of tread. I want to make sure the tread's wearing evenly and I don't have mismatched tires. I want to check using an air pressure gauge. I want to check that I have about 100 to 110 pounds of air in the tire. I also want to make sure that the valve stem is not damaged and it's got a valve cap in place.
No leaks.
Huh?
No leaks.
And it doesn't leak. Also, check the inner and outer sidewall of the tire. It's not cut, cracked, there's no bubbles. Okay, I'm going to check my rim. First of all, the rims, there's no weld repairs, there's no dents or holes. Naturally, the rim's going to be secure. No missing lugs. And the lugs are secure because there's no rust trails or shiny threads. Okie doke. I want to check my hub oil and axle seals are not worn, not leaking. I want to check the fluid level by pulling the plug and looking inside. Okay. A couple more things. Inside the tire, next to the tire, is your braking components. Check your brake hose, secure. not worn, not leaking. Check your brake chamber, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, not leaking. Check your slack adjuster and push rod, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, it's not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, and it's properly adjusted. No more than 1 inch of slack. You check this by making sure the brakes are released, pulling out on the push rod, and it doesn't move more than 1 inch. And then you can't see, but inside the wheel, you have your brake drum and your brake lining. They are secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn dangerously thin, no oil or grease on the drum or the linings. Now we're going to talk about our suspension. Check your shock absorber, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn, not leaking. Then you're going to talk about your leaf springs. They're secure. You want to make sure there's no missing or broken leaves, and they're properly aligned. Excuse me?
Shifted.
They're not shifted, you're saying. Instead of saying properly aligned, they want to hear shifted. Good thing I have her with me. Then we want to talk about our U-bolts. They're secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn. And then last but not least, we're talking about the front and the rear spring hangers, spring mounts, secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn. Now, I know that you can't see everything I'm talking about, so you got to just watch this video, and if anything, we can go over some things that you're not crystal clear on. That's the main thing. Anything you're not crystal clear on, you got to let me know. So, I think we're ready to go on to the second axle. So let me slide one down here. Okay, now you'll notice the second axle has 2 tires. So you're going to tell the examiner you're checking the inner and outer tires using a tread gauge. Make sure you got at least 2/32 of tread. I'm going to check my air pressure using the air gauge. I'm going to check the inner and outer tire for about 100 pounds of air. Again, I need to check the inner and outer valve stem. It's not damaged, not leaking. It's got a valve cap in place. I'm going to check the inner and outer rim. No weld repairs, not bent, not cracked, not broken. I'm going to check they're secure. The lug nuts are secure. They're all present. And I know they're secure because there's no rust trails or shiny thread. Okay. Again, check your axle seals, your inner and outer oil and axle seals are not worn or leaking. You cannot check the fluid level in the second axle. These are butt rims, so you got to make sure they're evenly spaced and there's no debris, no bottles, rocks, or foreign objects stuck in between the rim. Anything else?
Did you remember the air pressure?
Again, make sure you tell them with an air pressure gauge, making sure you got about 100 pounds of air in the inner and outer tires. Okay, now we're going to be checking our brake components. Now this is going to be easy because I'm going to tell them, check my brake hose just like I did up front. Check my brake chamber just like I did up front. Check my slack adjuster and push rod just like I did up front. Check my brake drums and brake linings just like I did up front. Gonna check the shock absorber just like I did up front. Gonna check my leaf spring just like I did up front. Gonna check my U-bolts just like I did up front. Gonna check the front and rear spring hangers just like I did up front. Now there is one thing back here that isn't on the front axle, and that is an airbag. So I got to go into the detail, tell them check the airbag, it's secure, no missing nuts and bolts, not bent, cracked, broken, or worn. Naturally, it's not leaking. Okie doke. So I think we're ready to move on to the trailer axle.